The set was shrouded in a thin mist, as if the very air carried an almost palpable electricity. It was the first day of filming for a movie that promised to bring together two cinema legends, Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. The studio, huge and filled with equipment, seemed small in the face of the immense presence of these two names, both known for their overwhelming talent and their intense personalities. Pacino arrived early, walking down the hallway with firm steps and eyes that seemed to pierce the walls. He knew De Niro was already there, waiting in a corner, still and silent, watching everything with the expression of someone calculating every move, every word. Neither of them approached the other. Just a fleeting glance, loaded with tension, crossed the space between them. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but enough to leave a challenging vibe in the air. No one really knew what was going through their minds. There were backstage rumors that, although professionals, the two had never had a friendship or even a cordial relationship. Words exchanged in old interviews hinted at a respect mixed with a silent rivalry, an invisible competition to see who would dominate the scene, even off camera. The director, an experienced man, felt the tension in the room and tried to break the ice with a forced smile, but it was in vain. The crew sensed the weight of that moment, as if they were about to witness not just the filming of a movie, but a confrontation between two opposing forces. As the cameras were being prepared, Pacino sat alone, slumped in his chair, eyes fixed on the floor but mind restless. De Niro stood near the window, looking outside as if searching for an answer he hadn't found yet. The silence between them spoke louder than any words ever could. And then, as the lights began to rise, something inexplicable happened. A chill ran through the set, and the distant sound of a siren, whose origin no one knew, echoed through the hallways. It was a strange sign, a premonition, as if that meeting was more than just a filming. Something was about to explode, and no one there could predict what it would be. The set was ready for the day's most important scene, a tense sequence where Pacino's and De Niro's characters were supposed to face off in a dialogue full of emotion and power. But even before the cameras started rolling, the atmosphere was already boiling. Pacino, known for his intense and explosive style, began to question the script. "This doesn't work. My character wouldn't say it like that, not in that tone," he said, his voice firm, almost challenging. De Niro, calm but just as relentless, replied, "The script was written that way, Al. You can't just make things up in the middle of the scene and expect everyone to follow your lead." Pacino raised an eyebrow, his gaze sharp. "Make things up? It's not making things up, it's bringing real life to the scene. You're too stuck to the script, Robert. It's like you're afraid to step out of your comfort zone." De Niro took a step forward, his face stern. "And you're trying to steal the spotlight, as always. This isn't a stage for your performances. If you want to shine, do it right, but within what was agreed upon." The director tried to step in, but was ignored. The tension turned into a storm. Sharp words began to fly through the air. "I've worked with great directors and never abandoned my gut to blindly follow a boring script. And I've carried movies on my back with discipline and focus, without needing stunts to seem intense." "Stunts? Watch out, Robert, you're playing with fire." "Fire? The one who's going to get burned here is you if you keep this up." The crew froze, not knowing where to look. The two titans, side by side, seemed ready to explode. Pacino pointed his finger in De Niro's face. De Niro responded by pushing the finger aside, almost daring him. The silence that followed was scarier than any shout. It was a moment when friendship, respect, and professionalism seemed to dissolve into thin air. Finally, the director shouted authoritatively, "Enough! Both of you stop right now, or the filming ends here today." But the damage was already done. The charged atmosphere of rivalry was palpable, making it clear that this wouldn't be an easy job. And worst of all, no one knew if the spark between them would die out or set everything on fire. The silence that fell over the studio after the argument felt more like the calm before the storm. The cameras were ready. The director took a deep breath, trying to control the invisible chaos hanging in the air. The scene they had to shoot was the most intense in the script. Two men on the edge of collapse, with cutting words and nearly violent gestures. Pacino entered the set with eyes burning, still smoldering from the bitter exchange minutes earlier. De Niro stared at him steadily, as if already prepared for any reaction. The crew, tense, avoided any unnecessary movement, fearing something might spiral out of control. On the first take, Pacino overdid the intensity, breaking from the expected tone. De Niro, steady, fired back with a cold, almost sharp line that irritated Pacino. The director called, "Cut!" But the silence was soon broken by a sharp comment from Pacino. "If you can't feel the emotion, you're not doing your job right." De Niro stared at him for a second, then shot back. "And if you think that's emotion, it's time to rethink what professionalism means." The exchange was quick but venomous. Pacino stepped forward, stopping just inches from De Niro, his voice low and threatening. "I don't have patience for your bullshit. Either you play along or get out of my way." De Niro didn't back down. He responded with the same coldness. "You can get out of my way, but it's going to take a lot more than your arrogance to take me down." The words were the spark. Pacino pushed De Niro hard, a move even he hadn't expected. De Niro, surprised, pushed back, and soon they were shoving each other, eyes blazing and fury overflowing. The entire set froze. Technicians and producers rushed to break it up. The director shouted orders nobody could hear clearly. Filming was immediately halted. Pacino stormed out of the room, face red, breathing heavily. De Niro stood there, frozen, staring into space, anger still clear in his eyes. No one knew what would happen next. The film that promised to be a masterpiece was on the brink of collapse. And with it, the careers of everyone involved seemed to hang by a thread. The heavy silence hanging over the studio felt even more suffocating than the confrontation that had just taken place. The lights were off, and the echo of the crew's hurried footsteps filled the emptiness. The director, exhausted and frustrated, quickly gathered with the producers, searching for a solution that seemed increasingly difficult. Meanwhile, in the hallway outside the set, Pacino walked alone, trying to control the anger burning inside him. He felt the weight of the moment, but his stubbornness kept him from backing down. "I can't be the guy who lets everything fall apart over a bad script," he thought. "But I'm not going to sacrifice my art for someone who doesn't understand it." On the other side, De Niro stood still, arms crossed, staring at the wall as if searching for strength to face what lay ahead. He knew this film could be a milestone in his career, but the price seemed too high. "If I give in now, I'll lose more than just a scene," he reflected. "I'll lose the respect I've earned." Hours later, the director decided to call the two in for a talk. In the small studio office, chairs were arranged in a tense circle. "We're here because we still believe in the potential of this project," he began, his voice firm but conciliatory. "But this will only work if both of you can set your differences aside, at least for now." Pacino and De Niro exchanged looks, silent, as if weighing every word. Finally, Pacino spoke. "I won't promise to play nice, but I'll try not to get in the way." De Niro gave a slight nod in response. "Same here. We'll do whatever it takes." The agreement was fragile, but it was a start. The director smiled, feeling a flicker of hope ignite. They would return to the set, knowing the battle wasn't over, but maybe this time, art could win the war. Back on set, the atmosphere was still heavy, but now layered with a new sense of anticipation. The crew, cautious, adjusted cameras and lights, aware that any spark could reignite the tension. Pacino and De Niro took their positions, each carrying their own inner battles, but determined to move forward. The director gave the signal, and the scene began. The script's lines were sharp, but this time, for the first time, there was something different. A real spark, an almost electric energy between the two actors. Their exchanged glances carried a brutal honesty, born from rivalry but also a tacit respect both were reluctant to admit. Pacino delivered his lines with restrained fury, while De Niro responded with an almost icy calm, a dance of contrasts that made every word resonate with immense weight. The crew, having witnessed thousands of tense scenes, felt they were witnessing something rare. Mid-scene, an unexpected moment. Instead of following the script exactly, De Niro dropped an improvised line, a barely audible whisper, loaded with challenge and irony. Pacino hesitated for a moment, but then, surprisingly, responded in the same tone, perfectly matching his reaction. Watching through the monitor, the director felt a lump in his throat. It was as if the silent battle between the two had found its own language, a form of dialogue that transcended the script. When the director finally called cut, the silence in the studio broke into timid applause that quickly grew into a full ovation from the crew. Pacino and De Niro looked at each other, not with hostility anymore, but with a kind of mutual recognition. What once seemed like a war ready to explode was now taking its first steps toward an unexpected alliance. Art, after all, was beginning to unite what rivalry had almost destroyed. After that almost improbable take, something changed, but not overnight. Backstage, the tension was still there, lingering like a wound that hadn't fully healed. But now there was a thin line of communication between Pacino and De Niro, an invisible thread beginning to pull them towards something more complex than just rivalry. During breaks in filming, they both avoided talking but no longer ignored each other like before. It was a different kind of silence, filled with a new mutual curiosity, a respect that only those who understand the depth of the craft could share. The director, watching every gesture, knew this was the crucial moment, to turn tension into fuel for art, not destruction. That day, the next sequence was even more delicate, a scene of vulnerability where the characters had to reveal their deepest pains, fears, and regrets. While the crew prepared everything, Pacino and De Niro stood side by side in the dressing room, a tense silence filling the space. Suddenly, it was De Niro who broke the ice, his voice low and almost weary. "Have you ever wondered, Al, why we hold on so much to this thing about being the best? It feels like we're always fighting not just on set, but in life." Pacino looked at him, surprised but not pulling away. "I don't know if it's about being the best. I think it's more about fear. Fear of not being enough." De Niro nodded slowly. "Fear of losing what we've already earned. But sometimes, that fear only leaves us lonelier." It was a rare moment of honesty, a glimpse of the man behind the legend. Pacino took a deep breath and replied, "Maybe we need to stop fighting so much and start listening more." When they stepped onto the set, something different was in the air. The anger and competition were still there, but now mixed with a raw and unexpected truth. The camera captured every glance, every heavy breath, every restrained gesture, all filled with an emotion that seemed bigger than the script itself. The director, watching on the monitor, felt this could be the moment that justified all the conflicts and built-up tension. The scene ended with a deep silence that seemed to say more than any dialogue could. After the shoot, Pacino and De Niro exchanged a brief handshake, simple but full of meaning. A silent pact, maybe not friendship, but true respect. There was still a long road ahead, with inevitable challenges. The rivalry, the pressure of the cameras, the audience's expectations, all still hovered like a shadow. But in that moment, it seemed art was somehow beginning to heal the open wounds. And as the studio lights dimmed, they left behind not just a day of filming, but the beginning of a story no one there would forget.